Greetings and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Just Teach. My name is Tamika and I'm one of the instructors on this platform. Just Teach is a podcast where we break down theological concepts to enhance your biblical and spiritual growth. Ezra 7:10 says, "For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of the Lord and to do it, and to teach in Israel statutes and judgments." Our effort at Just Teach is to seek, do, and teach the Word and will of God. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and click the all notifications bell. We upload weekly lessons, and your faithful engagement is certainly needed and most appreciated. We also want to invite you to visit us at justteachministries.com, where we have many Bible study resources. On the Store tab, you'll find lesson notes for all of the various passages we've studied on this platform, and the notes provided are the exact notes that we use for each presentation. Now, there is a direct link that we'll provide in the description of the video to the lesson notes, and there's also a link in the top of the comment section. And there you'll also find all of those notes available for a small donation. And we want to give a big thank you. Thank you so much to all of you who have chosen to support our ministry. We truly appreciate you. So let's jump right on in to our lesson for this week. We are in week 4 of the UMI annual commentary, and our lesson is God plans good. We're coming out of Numbers 14, verses 1 through 10. And our key verse for this week is coming from verse 8. If the Lord delight in us, he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. And we only have 2 points in the lesson this week, and that's going to be the people speak out in rebellion, and Joshua and Caleb speak. What we're going to do this week is evaluate the reasons for the Israelites' refusal to listen to Joshua and Caleb, desire deeper trust in the promises of God, and confront the future and confidence of God's guidance and provision. Now, as we're going through the lesson, I want you to keep this question at the back of your mind. When was there a moment in your life that you let fear keep you from God's blessings in your life? So, just to give you some background on our lesson, we're coming out of the book of Numbers. Remember that we are covering the Pentateuch right now, and we're in the 4th book of the Pentateuch, which is 5 books in the Bible written by Moses. Now, this particular book was written approximately 1450 to 1410 BC, likely during the time that the children of Israel were wandering in the wilderness somewhere in the Sinai Peninsula. So, the story of the book of Numbers, it tells the story of how Israel prepared the promised land, how they sinned, how they were punished, and how they prepared to try again. Now, the promised land is a term that is always known in Christianity as the land of Canaan, and it's a hillside country. It's a country hillside east of the Mediterranean Sea and west of the Jordan River. It's often described as the land flowing with milk and honey, signifying that it was a land of abundance. And we see that in Genesis 13, verse 14 through 17, where God promised Abraham that this land would be given to his descendants, the Israelites. So the Israelites occupied the promised land under the leadership of Joshua, and Joshua led the Israelites in the battle against the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, Hivitites, and the Jebusites. So we see that Caleb is one of the main characters in this text. And Caleb was actually one of the spies that was sent to survey the land of Canaan before they actually went in to conquer it. So Caleb was birthed into the tribe of Judah. And we all know this is the tribe that's associated with royalty because it produced King David and Jesus. So Caleb stood with Joshua with a voice of courage when the 12 spies, when 10 of the spies returned from the promised land, or 12 of them. So it was 12 of them, and there's 10 that's going to be a problem in this lesson. We'll get to that. So we see that in verse 24. And God promised to allow Caleb to enter the promised land due to his faithfulness. And when it was time for the next generation to take the land, Caleb led his clan to conquer the portion of land allotted to him. So he defeated some of the most formidable opponents in Canaan. And he actually, it was the giant of the sons of Anak. And we see that in Joshua 15:13 through 15. So that was some of the opponents he defeated. Now, Numbers 13 and 14 record that the Israelites journey in the wilderness after leaving Egypt. So that's where the record starts in Numbers 13 through 14. The journey to the wilderness is mentioned here. And while in the wilderness, God commands Moses to send one man, the leader of the ancestral tribe, to spy on the Canaan land. And we see that in chapter 13. So if you go back and read chapter 13, you get a list of all the other spies who were there along with Joshua and Caleb. So all of these men, they were to determine the land's quality and the people's strength. And after the men return from spying the land, they declare that Canaan is full of good things, but the people seem too strong to overcome. That's the people who were currently occupying Canaan. So there are things that God has promised us, but He never said that it will be easy to obtain those promises. So that's the scenario we have here in this lesson. So, as the other spies listed their objections to entering the land, it was only Caleb and Joshua who disagreed with their report. And we see that in Numbers 13:30 and chapter 14, verse 6 through 9. So Caleb and Joshua believed that they could prevail over their enemies in Canaan, but the negative report of the other 10 spies persuaded the rest of the Israelites, and they lamented that they had not remained in Egypt. So they started to regret even following Moses to get to the promised land. Now, the Israelites decided to choose another leader who could help them return to Egypt and stone their current leaders. But God intervened and interrupted their plans. So they had already forgotten that God defeated Pharaoh's army when they pursued them after Pharaoh let them go, and how God created a way of escape by parting the Red Sea, allowing them to cross and start their new lives in freedom. So that brings us to our first point. The people speak out in rebellion. And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, would God that we have died in the land of Egypt? Or would God we had died in this wilderness? And wherefore hath the Lord brought us unto this land to fall by the sword, that our wives and our children should be a prey? Where it not be better for us to return to Egypt? And they said one to another, let us make a captain and let us return to Egypt. So we see here, as mentioned, the 12 spies gave their reports, and Canaan about Canaan, and the Israelites did not want to enter the land that was promised to them because they feared what their eyes had seen, even though there was good things available to them in that land. So the 10 spies, they mentioned that they should not enter, while two of the spies of the 12, Caleb and Joshua, encouraged the people to receive God's blessing for their nation. So the people listened to the 10 spies who justified their desire to return to Egypt. How many know that anytime there's hardship in our lives, sometimes it's easy to want to give up and go back to what we're familiar with and what we're comfortable with? But their response was actually a rebellion against God's instructions. Now, the people complained and murmured against God and Moses, and they wept that night. So, that word wept in Hebrew is bakah. And the words mentioned here, murmured, that word murmured is a low muttered complaint or grumbling against God or authority figures, often arising from discontent and defiance. Now, in the Strong's dictionary, the Hebrew word for murmured portrays the destructive habit of murmuring, whispering, complaints, or back talking against divine or human authority. That's in the King James Version, but in the ESV version, the word grumbled is used in this verse. And the Strong's coordinates, that word grumble refers to the Greek word that means murmur, mutter, or complain discontentedly. So as they imagined their desperate condition, the people fretted, which gave credit to the negative report of the 10 spies instead of God's promises. Now, the negative report the 10 spies gave fueled their fear, causing their imaginations to run wild with the worst thoughts possible. And that fear caused them to doubt God. And because they feared that they would be dying soon, they wished that they were already dead. So when fear crept in, it actually clouded their perspective, their judgment, and their emotions, even their memory, because they're listening to this negative report and completely threw out the window the promise that God gave them. And we know that when God says a thing, it's going to come to pass. His word does not return unto him void. So the previous months of good living that they had experienced due to God's protection were dismissed and forgotten at at the negative report of the 10 of the 12 spies. And as the Israelites wished they had died in Egypt. So the Israelites looked forward with despair without realizing that God did not save them from Pharaoh to die at the hands of the Canaanites. Why would he bring them through all that they had been through for 40 years just for them to die? It doesn't make sense. Now, Isaiah 53 and 1 tells us, "Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed?" Well, we see here they're not believing the report of the Lord, which is his promises that they would possess the land of Canaan. So the Israelites responded to God's good plans with an audacity that God led them into a snare of death and destruction, causing them to turn on God's appointed leaders, Moses and Aaron. Now, this lesson brought to my remembrance something that I recently heard that just resonated with me. And that's all I could remember while I was reading this text. But it's a saying that emotions shouldn't drive your decisions. Your decisions should drive your emotions. So we can clearly see here that the emotion of fear is what's driving the Israelites in their decision making at this point. So their response was a result of the negative report of the spies and not the promises of God. So that brings us to our second and final point. Joshua and Caleb speak. Then Moses and Aaron fell on their faces before all the assembly of the congregation of the children of Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb the son of Jephunneh, which were of them that searched the land, rented their clothes. And they spake unto all the company of the children of Israel, saying, the land which we passed through to search it is an exceeding good land. If the Lord delight in us, then he will bring us into this land and give it to us, a land which floweth with milk and honey. Only rebel not ye against the Lord, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not. But all the congregation bade stone them with stones, and the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of the congregation before all the children of Israel. So now we see that through the loud cries of the Israelites, Moses and Aaron knew that the actions of the people would not please God. They had seen that earlier on, the complaints of the Israelites resulted in fire and plague from God. So, in response to their rebellion and rejection of God, Moses and Aaron humbly sought the face of God on their behalf. As the complaints of the people continued to produce clamor and rebellion, Moses prayed that the people would not ruin themselves. So, we see even Moses can see how their behavior is going to ruin them, and they can't see it. So, in response to the sins of the people and in dread of the wrath of God, which was already to befall them, Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes in verse 6, and they assured the angry Israelites of the blessings of the land they surveyed. Now, as the majority had reported, the land would not engulf them because Israel had God on their side. So, what they were seeing before their eyes was no match to the power that God. Just think of all the things that God had already done up until this point. They have completely forgot how the power of God works and worked on their behalf. So the Israelites did not confront their fear of entering the land that awaited them. And if they had actually confronted their fears, then they would have realized that their disbelief was a sin and they had provoked God to leave them. So the Israelites didn't realize that it would take faith to enter into the promised land, just as it took faith for them to get all the way up until this point. So Joshua and Caleb saw the abundance of the land and thought that it was worth fighting for, but due to the Israelites' lack of trust in God, they couldn't receive the fullness of God's promises because they were blinded by what they were seeing. Their fear was blind, their faith was blinded by what they were seeing. So Hebrews 11:6 tells us that, but without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. So we see that all the leaders are seeking the face of God, but the rest of the Israelites failed to do the same. And when we seek God's face in the midst of our troubles, it it puts our perspective back in place. And Joshua and Caleb, they were distressed by the Israelites' lack of faith and desire to return to Egypt. So the Israelites didn't realize that they were not in danger from the Canaanites, but in actuality, they were in danger from the wrath of God, their God, because they rebelled against him. Now, Joshua and Caleb encouraged the Israelites to trust that God would bring them to the promised land, and the Israelites responded in anger and distrust of the leadership God ordained for them, who desired to give them good counsel. But instead, they were blinded with anger, which caused them to want to stone the servants of God, making them unreasonable in their uncontrollable anger. And this is what led them to pick up stones to kill Joshua and Caleb. Now, stoning was actually a legitimate judicial punishment that an assembly had um, the authority to exact. So, upon anyone that they felt that was guilty of a religious crime, they had the judicial and legitimate right for that punishment to take place. But fear caused the people, again, fear caused the people to believe that Caleb and Joshua were not communicating the will of God to them and leading them to believe that they were false witnesses worthy to be stoned, breaking the commandments of God in the process. So the congregation had allowed itself to become convinced that God was in favor of their desire to return to Egypt. And we know that this is not true, because if that was true, he would have never delivered them to begin with. So the children of Israel felt justified in their belief and actions until the glory of God came into the tabernacle and appeared before them and spoke to Moses. So, what can we do with what we've learned today? It seems that the word fear is all throughout this lesson today. And fear is a tool that the enemy uses to keep us from God and his promises for us. Fear clouds our judgment and our emotions, and it makes us doubt God and ourselves. It can paralyze you and keep you stagnant in one place so that you're not able to move forward. And not only is it something that the enemy uses to hinder us and to keep us from moving forward, but fear triggers us into moving backwards. And when God allows you to see the thing that you're up against, don't let fear settle in your spirit. It is natural for us as humans. It's a natural response that when we see something as they saw, it can bring up fear within us. But God, we have to remember, greater is He that is in us than he that is in the world. God is bigger than all that we see. He's bigger than fear, and He has not given us the spirit of fear. Now, fear can make you forget that God has already promised. It'll make you forget what God has already promised you. So when you come across a situation that's meant to trigger fear within you, you just need to go back to God's word and remember what He's already told you and His promises to you. Go to Him for assistance in helping you overcome what you see. 2 Timothy 1:7 tells us, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." So that's it. That's the lesson. That is what I have for you this week. I hope that you've learned something new. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and I hope that you'll come back and join us next week for the next lesson. So until we meet again, God bless.